Hey everybody, Alex Cohen here.
And I'm Sara Sadhwani.
And welcome to the Inside the Issues podcast, and a special welcome if you are watching this on YouTube. We have just launched there. We are super excited. If you just want to listen to us and not see our faces, A-okay. But you can watch us too, and that's very, very exciting, especially considering all the things we got to talk about this week. Man, oh man, some serious presidential politics happening right here in our own backyard.
Absolutely. And what the heck is going on in Anaheim? We have been talking corruption in LA forever.
Yep.
Let's go to Anaheim and see what's happening, check in and see what's happening there.
Plenty of things happening there as well. And we could not get through this week without talking about Taylor Swift and her concert series here in LA, Inglewood to be precise. And even that has gotten political. So let's just jump right into it.
Let's jump right in. And
yes.
Alex, what were you doing today?
I brought some swag. So just an incredible story. GOP strategist named High Dunsmore, one of the big players, as you might recall, in the effort to recall Gavin Newsom. I was talking with her last week, and she was like, yeah, I got a call from the California GOP. They're doing a fundraiser for a Democrat. I said, okay, now I'm interested. But not just any Democrat. Talking, of course, about Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is running to be the Democratic nominee for president, but is getting a lot of interest.
Conspiracy theorist, anti-vaxxer. Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Just to make sure we're talking about
that same one, son of Robert. But,
yes.
it's as an amazing appeal with a lot of people here in Southern California. I thought, how interesting. Not cheap, by the way. The invitations, I believe, started at $5,000. I was just invited as guest. I'm a journalist. I didn't pay. I didn't contribute.
That was going to be my next question for you.
I grabbed this just as proof because they didn't want any, there was I was the only member of the media there. And here, this button, Sarah, says it all. Do you see it? It says, Fed Up, Kennedy for Change. And I will tell you what was so interesting about the night is that there were so many different types there. Yes, it was a GOP fundraiser, plenty of Democrats as well, plenty of no party preference, there was a Hollywood element there.
Yeah.
His wife, Cheryl Hines, was there. Rob Schneider was the MC. Oliver Stone was hanging out in the corner. But the one thing that everybody, like when I talk to people and be like, okay, why are you here? Right. Some folks were a little undecided, but a lot of folks were like, they were jazzed. They were because they're like, I don't like Trump. I don't like Biden. This guy I like. This guy can bring us together. This guy sees through all this stuff. It's really fascinating. And a lot of them told me that their experiences during COVID, their concerns about vaccines is what initially got them into the whole RFK Jr. train. But that honestly, it was, all these other things that he was about that really made them stick with him. I spoke to one guy there who was so fascinating, who said, chutzpah was the word that he used. He said, you're looking at a guy whose father ran for president, was assassinated here in L.A. at the Ambassador Hotel. I believe RFK Jr. was 7 years old. He was with him at the time.
Oh
Can you imagine? I mean, it's almost in some ways like a Batman story, right? You see your parent murdered. Most people would be like, oh, the heck, I'm going into politics. But he decided, no, I'm going into it. And that, for a lot of the folks there, was like he didn't have to do this. Profile and courage was words I saw bandied about.
You made RFK Jr. a superhero. I'm just gonna put that out there.
Because to some people he is.
He will be,
right?
Yeah, fair enough.
He is, right? Yeah. And is he my candidate? Right? That isn't even part of the equation.
Yeah, no,
of course, very serious concerns that have been brought up about what he has said about vaccines and things that have been proven not to be true, such as connection to autism, been disproved for years now. Concerns about things that he said about gender-affirming care, things that he said about COVID and Chinese people and Ashkenazi Jews, and I'm one of them. But so were a lot of the people there who paid $5,000 to hear them. There. So I have to just say this. Are you going to just write him off because you don't like or believe the things that he has to say? Or are you going to look at it and say, what do we take away from this politically in terms of, there's one Forbes poll that found RFK Jr. with higher favorability ratings than either Trump or Biden. And at least for some folks here, is this state going to go to RFK Jr.? Will he be our Democratic nominee? I don't think so at all.
I think so. Yeah.
But I think what he has done, and let's just bring in here what we do every week, our segment, What's the Word? The word this week is sway. And what was very clear to me is that this particular candidate, this environmental lawyer, has swayed a lot of people pretty mightily, not only to believe in him, but to believe in certain versions of the world in terms of elections and vaccines and all sorts of things. And these people are jazzed. They don't want to just contribute. They want to get involved. And these are people who've been so turned off by politics for a while that you just, I think, have to look at that. What is swaying them to get them involved now?
Yeah, I mean, I always find this fascinating, right? You have these sort of, I'll say, fringe candidates who aren't polling very well necessarily. I'm not familiar with this poll where he's polling better than
Forbes
Biden.
YouGov on favorability.
On favorability, not on actual votes.
Yes.
I think this is always fascinating, the folks who are going to put all their might and their money behind these candidates that are largely seen as more fringe, who don't necessarily have a strong chance to win California, let alone winning the Democratic primary.
Right.
It's really interesting to me. Like, is it you really believe that they have a chance, or like you're not in some sense of reality,
but maybe
or they just
not
want to see like they just want to support their friend, or they're just really excited about some alternative future.
Well, and also don't forget, this was a GOP fundraiser. And so I was asking people there, how do you, like, what about Trump? What about that guy? You know,
what about Ron
the third
DeSantis?
But
Nikki Haley,
but they were, and you know,
Tim Scott.
Okay, so Tim Scott, that's apparently someone they like.
Yeah.
You know, I had one person who's running for Senate, state Senate there in the OC, said everyone's done with Trump now. The OC is done with Trump. It's just too much. We have moved on. He is not our guy anymore. So I said, who is your guy? She said, well, you know what was kind of interesting? They said, Tim Scott showed up the other day. We really seem to like him. And so just what's interesting to me is, yeah, maybe RFK is not going to win the Democratic nomination, but why are so many Republicans there?
Right.
And what is that saying?
Right.
You got all these choices now, and you're at a fundraiser for a Democrat?
Right.
What is that saying?
Yeah, that's a fascinating one. I mean, I think when we look at lower level elections that operate in the top two primary, I think you do see a little bit more of those dynamics about voters really thinking in a calculated, strategic way. If we support the candidate from the other party, maybe our candidate will actually do better. When we're at the presidential politics level, though, a lot of those strategic calculations kind of fall away. So I think it is a really fascinating piece. Interesting, if we can switch gears just slightly.
Please.
Interesting to me to hear that people are saying Trump's not our guy, because just this weekend, the Republican Party of California was meeting and made some strategic in Irvine, in Orange County.
Location.
Exactly, and made some strategic changes to their delegate rules. Now, this is where we get into the wonky weeds of how a presidential candidate becomes that.
If we could only cue the ABBA, every time I think about this item, I think the ABBA song, "The Winner Takes It All," because they do now, right? This is a much more fun
This is turning
way of
into
thinking
Mamma
about
Mia,
it.
right?
Oh no, it totally is, right? So, and the new rule here is that any Republican who gets 50% or more of the vote in the March 5th primary will win all 169 delegates in California.
That's right.
So, what do you think is the end game there? Like, is this pro-Trump? Is it? What do you think they were thinking?
I think let's take a look at who is polling very well amongst Republicans, and that is Donald J. Trump at 54%, according to a poll from the New York Times back in July, just this month, essentially, and if Trump were to win 54% of the Republican primary, he takes all 169 delegate votes at the convention. That's significant. Previously, you could have a proportion of those.
And it will go to that. We should clarify.
Yes.
If Trump or anyone else doesn't get that majority of the vote, then it will be proportional.
Exactly. That's right. But if you've passed that threshold of 50%, then you get all. Winner takes it all, right?
Yep.
And so this is a way to solidify more of those delegate votes once they actually get to the convention. They're heading towards 1,234. That's what is essentially needed at the Republican convention in order for a candidate to win the nomination to be the Republican nominee.
I think this is a move by the California GOP to sway all of the candidates to come here. I mean, that's what stood out to me was that, okay, everybody writes California off as a place for like, oh, it's a blue state. Why would you even bother spending any time there? You're not going to raise that much money. It's not going to make that big of a difference. But if you look at what happened within 24 hours of this, this policy change being announced, Donald Trump said that he was going to come to the GOP convention in Anaheim in September. And then we found out by the way, I just love the numbers on this. Costs you $5,000 to go see RFK, to go to the lunch with Donald Trump, $500. That's a bargain.
That sure is a bargain.
Ron DeSantis coming out too. So I just think this is showing how much more California is having sway in the GOP. We also found out within that very short period of time that the second Republican primary debate will happen at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library. So all of a sudden, California is like somehow in play with
zero.
The GOP.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, for ground zero.
we got a lot of Republican action going on. I agree with you, right? So Jessica Millen Patterson, the head of the state's GOP, said Republican presidential candidates will not only be encouraged to spend real time campaigning in our state and making their case to voters, but Republican voters will be equally encouraged to turn out to support them. And I think that's lovely and wonderful. But at the same time, who was pushing for this change in the party's rules? Donald Trump, right? Because he knows that even though people say that they're over him, they don't want him anymore, at the end of the day, people do oftentimes vote based on who they think can win.
Yes.
And can Donald Trump win? I mean, so long as he's not in jail, probably he can.
Yes. Yeah. It was interesting. One of the folks that I spoke with at this event for RFK is Orange County Supervisor Don Wagner. And I was asking him, he was like, oh, yeah, everybody's over Trump. And I was like, so what does this mean for you as a Republican if you're on the ballot? He was like, it just doesn't, like, Trump is just so his own category. Like Trump is just Trump. It's almost not even Republican.
No, he's redefined the Republican Party.
Yeah, I'm not sure that it necessarily helps us at all. The other thing that I asked Don Wagner about, because part of his district includes Anaheim, I was like, so Don, what do you think of all of these stories that we're seeing now coming out, specifically in the Los Angeles Times, about corruption in Anaheim? I will tell you what Don said in a moment. Do you want to fill for folks who
just a little bit of that background?
Yeah.
So we've heard about these FBI investigations occurring in Anaheim, what has been called a cabal between politicians, business leaders, and lobbyists. Reports coming out about secret lobbying meetings, all sorts of schemes in order to get in touch or get meetings with the mayor of Anaheim, Harry Sidhu, who I should note was the first person of color to ever be elected to serve as mayor of Anaheim. He's been serving on the city council since 2004 until he resigned last year amidst all of these allegations.
Yeah, deals with the
with Disney,
Angels of Anaheim Stadium.
It's trying to sell Angel Stadium, and it's all looking real messy. Now they're looking into COVID relief payments, millions of dollars that was received by the city going out to different places. Some of this money kind of being funneled to the Anaheim Chamber of Commerce, who seemed to serve as playing some sort of role. If people wanted a meeting with the mayor, they went through the Chamber of Commerce. They had to, give a donation to the Chamber of Commerce.
So they were trying to sway the mayor?
They were trying to sway the mayor. That's right.
And I think, okay, so here's what Don Wagner told me. He said, on the one hand, he's like, I think that there's a lot of like that redheaded stepchild feeling that Orange County has. It's always about LA. Even the scandals are always about LA. So on the one hand, you're like, there's really important stuff going on here too. We're glad to see our politics get some attention. He said, he felt like some of the sensationalizing, there was a fascinating read about one local elected official there, I believe, on the city council who had these like super intensely close birthday twin relationships with lobbyists, and then like it all fell apart. It's, it felt like a little bit over dramatized. He's like, but there's definitely some stuff that's been going on here as well. And he's, we've got to show all of us have got to show now that we are taking our ethical codes seriously.
That's
and I know that they're talking in Anaheim about bringing in all these, ethics
consultants
and things like that. Mayor Bass has done that in LA with Norm Eisen, who used to work with President Obama. And I just feel like, I don't know, how do you be an ethics consultant? Like, if you get to that point, I don't know.
Don't do sketchy stuff.
Right?
But
it's like
easier
who
said
goes
than
through
done.
who doesn't go through their company's training on like harassment.
Yes.
You know you're not supposed to do it, but is that video actually going to change someone who's going to be inappropriate?
Right.
I don't know.
I don't know either. And I do want to just also note, when we're looking at this scandal, I couldn't help but get some vibes from LA, right? And the recent scandal, which we've talked at length about, of Councilmember Curran Price, who has been charged by the county district attorney. But in this instance, the mayor actually has not been charged with anything. There is an FBI investigation. The headlines are out. Interestingly, the LA Times reporting about this group, the JL group out of Laguna Niguel, who issued an over 300-page report. And I kept scratching my head like, who is this JL group and how much were they paid in order to do this investigation? So I'm just really curious if there will be any charges actually brought against the mayor. I'm absolutely 100% down for ethics, for sure, for all layers of governance. But at the same time, we have said over and over again around Curran Price, innocent until proven guilty. That should innocent until charged minimally, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we don't even have charges at this point.
Speaking of Curran Price, another thing that happened, LA City Council back in session, Imelda Padilla officially sworn in. And given that Curran Price right now not with the council, they reshuffled all of his committees. That was something that happened in council this week. Another big thing that happened in council this week is that you saw those who've been fighting on behalf of tenant protections really coming out strong. This is the first week of August, folks. August 1st was when all of this money that people didn't have to pay during the COVID-related eviction moratoriums, it's all kind of coming due right now, which for some people could theoretically be up to 18 months. I can't imagine. Can you imagine like paying 18 times what you normally pay per month is
if you weren't
insane.
able to pay it for those last 18 months.
Right.
Has your situation changed to such an extent that you can pay that much of a backlog?
I can't think of anybody who has. Now, what the real concern is here is that if folks get evicted, whatever kind of chipping away we might have been doing on the homelessness front is going to be totally blown out of the water by what they've been calling, this eviction tsunami. So I had the chance to speak about it this week with Councilmember Nithya Raman, who's been very much on the front of these tenant protections. And one of the things that they're doing, which is really interesting, that it'll be fascinating to see if this makes a difference, is one of the new moves is if you're a landlord now and you say, I'm going to move to evict my tenant, you have to file that with the city's housing department. And that means then the city can call the tenant in whatever language they might speak and say, here are the resources for you. They are very, very, very committed to doing this. Will it make a difference? Will be fascinating to see. I think it was something like 27,000 evictions within the past 12 months. Does that number continue to climb?
Will they actually have the capacity to do that many phone calls and that much outreach as well?
Right, and all that. Yes, very good question. While I was talking with Nithya Raman, I, of course, had to ask her about something we've talked about on this podcast many times, which is the memo reportedly sent out by LA City Attorney Heidi Feldman Soto, calling on council members and elected officials to not get involved with protests. And Nithya Raman, and you might recall Hugo Martinez, Wendy Carrillo, assembly member, all got arrested, right? Like cameras caught it. They got arrested while protesting with hotel workers out by LAX. And I said to Nithya Raman, I'm like, so how do you feel about that memo? Let's hear what she had to say.
I feel like we all come in with opinions. I don't think anyone is electing us because we are completely unbiased judges of every decision before us. We come in wearing our values on our sleeve. And for me, those values include supporting workers' rights, supporting a living wage, supporting the capacity of workers to be able to speak out. In fact, my husband is on the strike lines right now as a member of the WGA, and I've been walking the picket line with him whenever I can. And so, for me, my support of these protests really doesn't prevent me from being able to do my job or fulfill my position. So I would say that I have a difference of opinion from our city attorney on this issue.
And one more item related to the hotel strike that has come up this week that I find fascinating. Swiftie fans, you know this. Taylor Swift is in town at SoFi Stadium doing all these concerts. And this letter came out this week from a number of notable California politicians, including our lieutenant governor, calling on Taylor Swift to cancel the concerts so that people wouldn't stay at the hotels and the hotels would feel the impact of the strike. Sarah, what do you think? Will this sway Taylor Swift?
Will this sway Taylor Swift or her Swifties?
Or will she shake it off?
My sense is she's going to shake it off, friends. And then it came out after this letter goes out that indeed the lieutenant governor herself went to one of the Taylor Swift concerts, not in Los Angeles where we have this labor strike, but, instead in, where was it? Santa Clara.
Taylor for me, but not for thee.
Exactly. Rules for thee, but not for me. I had that same note.
Great minds.
So it's fascinating. I mean, this is like the who's who letter of people who want higher office. I don't know. A good way, of course, Eleni Kounalakis has already announced that she's going to run for governor in 2026. Great way to get her name in the press, people talking about it. But then this comes out that she had already gone to a Taylor Swift concert. I don't think voters
that didn't go over very well on social media, on X. Lots of not so sure about this. And really, if you're talking about like swaying the hotel owners, okay, like I'm sure that would, if Taylor were to cancel the concerts, of course it would have not only a big impact on the hotels, it would really raise the profile of this to a huge national, if not global level, right? Having Taylor on your side is a big thing. Like, look at all the strikes going on in Hollywood right now, right? They've got all their famous people, hotel workers. It's harder. Sure. I'm sure it'd be great to have Taylor Swift. But what about all those other, like, what about all the people whose back rent now is owed who rely on jobs at SoFi Stadium or selling the bacon-wrapped hot dogs outside the venue? Like,
this was one of the things I keep wondering about is, like, there's a whole lot of other workers in Los Angeles as well. And I'm not suggesting we should not be in support of the hotel workers for sure. But at the same time, there's also a lot of workers for SoFi and other folks. I mean, I haven't heard any conversation about what would happen to them or their wages were these concerts to be completely canceled. So much to learn and see as that all unfolds this weekend.
Indeed. Yes. We will not be at I won't be at the Taylor Swift concerts. Not that I wouldn't like to go. But yeah, that is it for our episode this week. If you know folks not going to the Taylor Swift concert, looking for something to do, please direct them to YouTube. Tell them that they can watch this podcast now, as well as listen to it. You'll find us on all the podcast channels and now on YouTube. Right. And of course, you can still find us on all the social media platforms. Right. You are there at
Sara Sadhwani on the platform formerly known as Twitter, as well as Instagram.
Yes, are you Zeding or whatever they're calling it now? I am at Alex Cohen in LA. And one last thing before we go. We will be here next week. Sadly, the incredible producer who has been with us from the get-go will not be. We bid a very fond farewell to Hannah Pokish, who has done amazing work for us here at Inside the Issues. Hopefully she'll be running the country at some point. Hannah, thank you so much. Everyone else, we'll see you here next week. The Inside the Issues podcast is a Spectrum News One production. Hannah Pokish is our producer. Nathaniel Leathers is our editor. The executive in charge of production is Jeff Shore.